So, everyone, welcome to the Feeling Inspired podcast. My special guest today is a gentleman by the name of Brendan Kane, who's written a book called 1 Million Followers, and I'm so excited to have him on today. So, let's give him a huge round of applause. So, thank you, Brendan, for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, firstly, for your book as well, because I think that was definitely really helpful. I managed to get a special offer on Audible, so I grabbed it, well, even though I had a copy. Like I said to you in my email, I've kind of been following a lot of the stuff that you pretty much said in the book as well. But there's a few specific challenges I'm having. So, which I think I'm not the only one. A lot of people are also having as well. So things like, for example, I'll start straight off with, for example, video. For some reason on my page, I really struggle with video. So if you looked at my page right now, you'd see the engagement on my pictures are very high, very good. But for some reason, my video just hardly gets any engagement. That is, if I just do a natural video, I do a live, I share a video by myself without sharing it to anyone else or groups or asking anyone else to share it for me, my engagement on it is very, very low generally. So I've just never been able to figure out why. It seems like my page is penalized or something. I don't know. I can't quite figure it out.
So the biggest thing that you've got to understand about any social platform when it comes to content, especially video, is the algorithm's role and the algorithm's job. Now, people hear the word algorithm, they automatically demonize it and think it's out to get them or get them to pay for reach and things of that nature. But it's simply not the case. The algorithms have a very difficult job to do. And they have only one goal, and that goal is to keep people on the platform longer. That's how these social platforms make money. As the longer you spend on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whatever platform it is, that's how their business operates. So the algorithms have one job and one job only, is what content are they going to see to each individual as they open up the app that has the highest likelihood to retain them and keep them on the platform longer. And just visualize this as a consumer, and next time you open up one of these apps, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, whatever it is, TikTok, LinkedIn, it doesn't matter. But once you open up that app, there's probably 1,000 pieces of content the algorithms can seed to you based on all the people that you're following and all of the content you've engaged with in the post. So that presents a very difficult problem, because obviously the algorithms can't seed 1,000 pieces of content into that main feed as you open it. It needs to prioritize what are the first 5, 10, 15 posts. And if your content doesn't meet the criteria that the algorithms are looking for, meaning that it doesn't believe it's going to retain the audience, then they're going to favor other content ahead of it. And that's a lot of what you see when there's accounts with large followings that have minimal engagement or minimal reach. It's not because they have fake followers or unengaged followers. It's simply that the algorithms have deemed not to give it reach. So when we talk about video specifically, and the challenge that you're running into in a lot of people is understanding the factors and variables that the algorithms are looking for to determine whether it's going to give it reach or not. So specifically when we talk about Facebook, and it typically is the same for other platforms, but with Facebook, you can see it clearly in their data set, is we look at a few key metrics to determine whether our content is going to be successful and whether the algorithms are going to give us reach. And we optimize our content against these metrics. So the first metric is the view to reach ratio. So what that means is views today, especially on Facebook, are not counted at the 1 second mark. They're counted at the 3 second mark, because back a few years ago, advertisers were up in arms about getting charged at a 1 second view because it didn't really show intent. It's like just the video was loading and people are scrolling past it. So they changed it to be at 3 seconds, and most social platforms operate under that as well. So what the algorithms are looking at is, what is the ratio of the number of 3 second views generated with the reach that they give it? And then we create, a ratio off of that. And what that tells the algorithm is, are people actually stopping and even staying for 3 seconds, or are they just scrolling past it automatically? So typically our benchmark and threshold is about 30% is the absolute lowest that you want. Anything below 30%, you're just not going to get any reach. But the key target is around 40 to 50%. Anything over 40 or 50%, that's great. Anything over 50% beyond, you're going to get maximum reach. So that's one of the first metrics to pay attention to, is in your analytics, is what is my ratio of views to reach? And if it's below 30%, then what it's telling you is your creative is not, your video is not positioned in a way that's getting people to stop in its feed. So you've got to figure out, and one of the terms that we use is pattern interruption, is how can you interrupt that pattern of that constant never ending scrolling to get them to stop for at least 3 seconds. Because if you can't get them to stop in those first 3 seconds, then you're not going to get them to pay attention to the next 5, 10, 15, 20. So your first job is to pay attention to what that ratio is and how can you push that ratio up as high as possible. And as I break down in the book of doing the hypothesis test and pivot, if you want to get really good at video, is really hypothesize of what's going to get that pattern interruption to get somebody to stop in those first 3 seconds. So after that view to reach ratio, then we will look at the shares to views, specifically on Facebook. So what does that share to view ratio look like? And typically we want to see around 1% share to view ratio. Obviously, as you scale to tens of millions of views, that may dip a little bit low, but 1% is a really solid benchmark for that. And then the third metric is just overall, what's the overall retention of the video? And Facebook has an amazing retention graph in the post analytics that you can look at to see how long people are staying. And this, again, is on any platform, is the algorithms are going to give you massive reach if you're retaining people. If they're spending a lot of time on your content, they're going to want to seed it to as many people as possible because that is good for their business. Versus what's not good for their business is you open up the app and people are just scrolling past every piece of content, you get bored, you close the app. And if that behavior happens over and over and over again, ultimately they'll stop using the app. So that's at a very high level of kind of how we look at video performance and how we go about testing and fixing video performance.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense. And I guess the obvious question after that is, I know you said obviously a little bit about testing and, you know, trialing and doing a bit of split testing or A/B testing on something, a piece of content. What do you say to someone who feels that their content is good? If you if I show it to someone, they say, yeah, this is a fantastic piece of content, and they really enjoy it. They love it. They loved watching it. The consensus is the content is great, but it still feels like that it's not picking up. Do you know what I mean? And like, so what's the best way to turn this around? What can I do specifically, or anyone else in my boat, if they're struggling and they're trying different things, putting out different pieces of content, but it just feels like an uphill struggle in that respect. So like I said, images, if you were to look at my page right now, I posted an image at 11 a.m. this morning. It's already had, you know, well over 1,000 likes and a few hundred shares, which is not bad for a few hours, not too bad at all. But if you look at, say, a video that I post, you know, it would not even be, well, probably 2% of that, if that. And again, just trying different things, even posting what would normally be popular viral videos. So there was a video recently, I'm sure you must have seen it, with the two babies running towards each other, the white baby, the black baby. And, you know, anyone else posts that video, it goes crazy. On my page, it still did okay. It did a lot better than my usual stuff, but it still didn't perform brilliantly, I would say. So what can someone do to turn that around?
Well, there's a few things. One, even with that video that went viral, you've got to still look at the metrics and just see what is the retention rate. You know, what is that view to share ratio? What is the view to reach ratio? You've got to be paying attention to the data. And I'm very hesitant to ever show somebody content and ask them their opinion, is let the data. Because what people say and what people do are two completely different things most of the time. And just because somebody tells you it's an amazing piece of content, look at the data. Does the data tell you it's an amazing piece of content? Now, beyond that, you can build more trust in the algorithm. And that's where you've got to be. This is one of the reasons I hate the methodology of just post multiple times a day. Post as much content as you can. Now, was that a great strategy 5 or 6 years ago? Yes. But today, with the algorithms, if you keep posting content and it doesn't resonate, it does ding you in the algorithm. It does put a negative stain on your page or your account in the algorithms ranking in their eyes. Now, does that say that you're doomed and you can't overcome it? No, absolutely not. You can overcome it as long as you're not doing nefarious things with bots and other things on your account. Now, a few ways to overcome that is, one, whenever you're posting content, do not post content for the sake of posting content. Post content because you're going to learn something from it and because you feel that there's something that will succeed with that content. Now, does that mean you're going to be successful all the time? No. Does that mean we're successful all the time? Absolutely not. But if you win more than you lose, you will create more trust in the algorithms. Now, another way that you can go about it specifically with Facebook is you can look at getting larger pages to share your account, to give you more reach, to spike, to show that the content is being shared by highly weighted accounts. That can help. Now, again, all that does is give your content more reach. The content still has to do its job, because the algorithms, when it's shared to that page, it'll do the same thing. It'll test it with an audience and see what those ratios add up to. And if it adds up to the ratios that we just broke down, it'll give you more reach, and it'll just keep measuring and measuring and measuring. So getting bigger pages to share it can definitely help if your content is dialed in. Another avenue that you can take, and I only recommend taking this avenue if A, you have your content dialed in and you have a business use case of how you're going to maximize the potential of it, is you can use paid advertising to put behind a piece of content. Again, only if it's performing. Is because if you're putting paid content behind an organic piece of putting paid advertising behind a paid piece of organic content and it's not performing, you're basically training the algorithms that you're not a good content creator. Versus if your content is dialed in and you just need that reach, if those ratios add up, if your view to share ratio is over 30%, if your view to reach ratio is over 30%, your share to view ratio is over 1% or around 1%, then what you can do, if you're still not getting the reach, then you can put some paid behind it and see if it takes off from there as well.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, sounds good. Okay, cool. I would definitely try that. Another thing that I not struggle with, that I've been doing, but I know some people struggle with, is translating some of their success to other platforms. One thing I do, and I know you mentioned in the book that if you produce content right for something like Instagram, then it becomes much easier to grow it much quicker. And obviously not just grow it for the sake of growing it, but with an engaged following. And one thing I do is, for example, on some of my pictures or posts that do really well, I'll link to my Instagram account. And that's been working quite well to drive a bit of traffic there and grow that as well. But it's not going as fast as I would like. So what other things can I do if I want to translate my success, say, from Facebook to Instagram? What other things can I do to drive people from one platform to another?
Yeah, it's very difficult to drive traffic from one platform to the other. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but very few people have been able to do it successfully. So you can do what you're talking about. And again, it's one thing that's driving some method of growth, but not the type of growth that you're using. You can push through email newsletters and things of that nature. But really, if we want to talk about Instagram and growth around Instagram, the way that I've found the fastest way to grow is to take your content and distribute it out on other accounts and drive it back. So we find strategic partners with accounts that have millions of followers, and then we get them to post our content on their page to drive it back. Now, there's different ways you can do that. You can do that purely organically and create some type of strategic relationship or partnership that benefits them. So as a result, they're willing to do it for free. Or you can pay for that placement in the form of a shout out where you're paying to advertise on their account to drive traffic back. Now, a few things to consider when looking at that. One, just because you get your content distributed on an account with millions of followers does not necessarily mean it's going to correlate to massive follower growth for your account. So for example, we have one account that has over 15 million followers. And if we post on that account with a non-optimized piece of content, just whatever content we want, it could only correlate to a few hundred followers. Versus if we really pay attention and optimize the content that we're going to post on that account, it could equate to tens of thousands of followers from a single post. So really understanding the consumer behavior and the mindset of the person that is being exposed to this content, thinking about why should somebody follow my account? What is it unique? Almost thinking about it as a billboard or a TV spot for your account that really incentivizes and motivates people to go and be like, I have to follow this account to be a part of this community or be a part of this person's content or learn from them more. So that's kind of the way that we've seen dramatic success with Instagram is the distribution of content on other accounts and driving it back to your account to get them to follow.
Okay, no worries. And do you really think the shout out variety of kind of, getting people to do you shout outs actually work? Do you think have you seen people have significant success with that?
I mean, we've generated millions of followers. Our partners have probably generated over at least 20 million followers doing that model. It definitely works if you have the right creative. That's what it comes down to. Is like, can it fail miserably and not work? Absolutely. It's not guaranteed. It comes down to the content, and it makes sense. Is like, let's just say you're following an account that you follow all the time, and then all of a sudden they post a piece of content of another account. It's like, what is going to cause you to be like, I have to go follow this person? And just think about it from a larger scale of distribution. So let's talk about The Rock or Kim Kardashian or Ariana Grande or Cristiano Ronaldo. All have over 100 million followers plus. Now, people may say, well, they generated all of those followers organically. No, they didn't. Because they have all these channels driving traffic to them. So for The Rock, for example, each movie that he's in, they probably spend between $50 to $150 million promoting that movie, which is marketing behind him. And then when he's on press tours, he's on podcasts, he's on television, he's on radio. Same with Kim Kardashian or Ariana Grande. Is like, they're everywhere. They're on the cover of Vogue magazine. They're on Vogue.com. They're on all these they're on TMZ and all these different outlets, all of them distributing and driving traffic back to their brand. Same with Cristiano Ronaldo. He's on every single sports station, and every time he's on television, that is a traffic source that is driving back to their brand. So what we're just saying is, listen, we're not, myself included, we're not at that level. We don't have television, print. We don't have movie studios spending tens of millions of dollars promoting us. So what we say is, okay, start within, take that same analogy and same model, but do it within the ecosystem of Instagram, where those other bigger celebrities are taking external forces and driving back to their brand and to their account. What we're doing is we're just taking accounts within the Instagram ecosystem and packaging it in such a way that will drive it back. Now, I can definitively tell you we're constantly testing. And sometimes when we do shout outs, it's an utter failure and it just doesn't work because the creative's not dialed in. But we'll just keep testing and testing until we find a creative and find direction that inspires and sparks the motivation to go follow that account. Now, one of the other tricks that we do is typically when we're running these shout outs on other accounts is we'll put the account on private because it gains at a much higher rate. Now, is there a loss associated with it? Yes. And I get people looking at my IG blade all the time and saying, oh, well, you're losing followers every day. Well, we can gain 80,000 followers in a matter of a day or two. And for me, I'm willing to gain that much and lose 10,000 of it because we grow so quickly. So it's just a matter of kind of choice and a matter of perspective of the way that you grow those accounts. But can it not work? Absolutely. If you don't do it right. Sometimes it doesn't work for us, but can it work in general? Absolutely. I mean, again, our network has probably generated over 20 million followers, if not more than that. I mean, we don't really keep track of it using this methodology and process.
Makes perfect sense. Okay. And another thing that you said, I'll come back to that actually, because it's kind of, I lost my train of thought a little bit, but I'll come back to that. But one thing I know that you mentioned in the book is about YouTube and it being a much more challenging platform to grow, which I would agree with. And do you think that, because you mentioned about cross-posting or posting something, a piece of content on the other platforms as well, I've heard some people say, look, some content will just not work on other platforms. And I kind of see that, would you agree with that as well? If you create one video and you put it on Facebook and you put it on Instagram, so, you size it correctly, you put it on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, would you say that's a good way to go? Because then you're putting out content on all the platforms.
So what I would do is I would focus on one platform and get really good at that platform. And then you can see if by syndicating out that content to other platforms, it correlates. I will say that, if you can get content to work on Facebook, it will typically work on Instagram and it'll typically work on LinkedIn. Their algorithms are very similar in terms of how they prioritize content and what they look like. And similar with like Instagram. If you can get Instagram to work, typically it'll work for Facebook and typically it'll work for LinkedIn. But Facebook is probably one of the toughest right now. But if you can get Facebook to work, the ceiling is so high. That's where you can see people generate hundreds of millions of views on a video. It's not to say that, like Instagram, I think that, I don't know if I've ever seen a video with 100 million views plus. I'm not saying that there's never been one. LinkedIn's definitely not there as well. YouTube, like only the musicians do it really. And they can get into the billions, but it's just understanding the consumer behavior and consumption. So YouTube is a very different beast and a different animal and than Facebook or Instagram. And I'm not going to say definitively it can't cross-pollinate, but I would bucket like Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn together and treat YouTube completely differently.
All right, sounds good. So the question I was going to ask earlier, call back to something else you said about frequency of posting, because I think that's definitely a big question that I get asked. So I still post 12 times a day on my Facebook pages, so I'm sharing other people's content and they're sharing mine. So it's that share for share agreement. Mm-hmm. Would you say that's a bad strategy now? Is that not a good way to go, or something still valid to do now to help build that growth?
So it's about the content itself. I don't want people posting content for the sake of posting content. Now you have a strategic play. You're doing share for share. So your posting 12 times a day is playing into a larger strategy. On the flip side, if you weren't doing share for share, I would say I would only post 12 times a day if you feel that those 12 posts are going to deliver performance and you're learning from each post that you put out. That is the biggest thing. And that's like, again, I'm a huge proponent, and my team is a huge proponent of quality over quantity. And we've just seen that over and over again. My creative director has over 40 billion views under his belt. His team was, in his previous company, was doing 3.5 billion views a month. And they were beating out BuzzFeed and other competitors, and they were posting a fraction. There was like one snapshot that we looked at the analytics where in 1 month they did 4 videos and BuzzFeed did 250, and they outperformed BuzzFeed.
Wow.
Because they paid so much attention to the performance drivers of that content to drive it. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you to post 12 times a day or 0 times a day or 1 time a day. It comes down to, are you learning from it? Are you making a hypothesis? Even if it doesn't work, is it driving it? Or in your case, do you have a strategic alliance or partnership that is growing the overall growth of the page or the engagement? So that's kind of where I fall into it. It's more about what are you doing with the content that you're posting and producing than how much are you actually creating. But I think that a lot of people have put too much pressure on themselves just to post for the sake of posting, and then that negatively impacts their overall performance.
So to just kind of finalize and clear that point up for people who might ask that question. So if someone is posting once a week and it's a good piece of content, it's not going to affect them in terms of the algorithm just because they're posting once a week, right? It's not like Facebook is geared towards someone who's posting more frequently as opposed to someone who's posting less. Does that make a difference?
It's more about that content that you do post. Is it good or not? Now, other people may have other philosophies, and were the algorithms different 5, 6, 7 years ago? Yes. But we've just seen it in our data. And again, like, this is all from our learnings where we've seen success. And, as you know, the way that I structure the book and all of our information is we provide multiple options, and you test and see what works for you. Like if you're posting 12 times a day and you're growing, you're hitting your KPIs, that's awesome. Keep doing it. If you're not generating the reach, the engagement you're looking for, then I would rethink it and try a different strategy. But the only one that we've seen it with is YouTube is more about frequency. But even with that, We see people that sometimes post like once a month or once every 3 weeks, and their content is just so dialed in and so good that it just takes off.
All right, cool. That's good to know. And one other thing that's been important for me is understanding certain copyright rules. So I mentioned about sharing that video of the two babies. I wasn't sure actually, and I was always a bit. Um, I felt that intrepidation of posting on Facebook because I know they're quite hot on removing videos, especially if someone reports it. But I thought, let me try. I've never really posted anything like that on my page. I was curious to see what would happen, so I posted it, put it on my page. There are certain channels on YouTube that I follow, and they tend to use content from other people. So, there's one channel called Motiversity, and they'll share content from, or they'll create, mashup videos of motivational speakers, Les Brown, snippets of Tony Robbins, and sometimes they use their video footage, but most of the time it's their voice, and they have like stock footage over the top. And I wanted your take on what the rules are around using other people's content. Like I see some people who are very good at crediting the owner, and they'll put that in. I see some people who don't bother crediting anyone, but they'll still use the video and it still does great, and they get hundreds of or hundreds of thousands of views or whatever. So what's a good rule to understand for this? Can you use other people's content if you credit them, or is that just an absolute no-no?
So I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to give legal advice. I would say the way to look at it is research fair use laws and the laws around that. When using other people's content, I always recommend crediting it if you know where it came from. Now, sometimes, we have found clips on other sources like Reddit and other stuff where we just didn't know who it was, and thus we couldn't credit it. But I always recommend crediting, and then looking at how can you make that content your own. Because that's where fair use really comes in, is taking a piece of content and doing a new spin on it, a new work. So one of the formats that we've seen to be very successful is you provide commentary on that viral clip. What does it mean to you? What is the key takeaway? What are the lessons? And that can work from there. So that's kind of the way to look at it. I'm not going to give legal guidance because I'm not a lawyer on it. I would just research fair use law, always give credit, and then I recommend, if you're going to take a viral clip and credit it, provide some unique perspective on it or some commentary, make it your own. Because at the end of the day, if you're just posting other people's content, what is that really doing for your brand? Maybe it'll gain more reach and get more credibility in it, but if somebody watches a viral video of a dog that you post on your account and it's not associated with any perspective that you're giving, then how is it really tying people back to your brand?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting though you say that, because I think you see people do it all the time, and you imagine that it's just because it gives their page a bit more extra engagement, and
it does,
maybe,
and it works to do that. It's just I choose when we looked at that, and listen, we tested it that way in the beginning, but then when we were just thinking about it, it's like, okay, if it gives us extra reach and engagement, that is a benefit, but is there a way to actually play into fair use, create a unique version of it with our commentary that then, ties back to our brand at the same time?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that was pretty much it. I think, what would you again, I've got a lot of people and a lot of friends who are sort of relatively new and just starting out, and I think that they're struggling because it can be so overwhelming for some people, especially if they're starting, at a time like this, I think, when there's even more content out there. And what would be the best piece of advice you can give, or just, a few nuggets that would help people get started to stand out so that their content can be seen, in that infinite scroll scenario?
Well, in the new version of the book, I start with this because I think it's critically important, is understanding why you're doing it. What is social media going to do for your brand? What is it going to do for your business? And really think about that. Because if you do not have that solid foundation from a mindset perspective, you're going to give up. Because I've been in the digital space for 15 years, and we are still learning. We are still being challenged. We are still running into obstacles. And you need to have that solid foundation and mindset in order to be successful. And then secondarily is just get started. Just don't overthink it. Even if you're recording something in your iPhone, it's like we have a private group where we work with content creators. And when we We work in that group. We have people that have started, they're creating their first piece of content, and we have advanced people that have generated millions of views already. And we always just say is we can't help you and you cannot help yourself if you're not creating. Because if you don't just create something, you're never going to learn. So don't overthink it in the beginning. Just create and learn from each creation. And then I think also is really studying, become a student. This is like anything else. It's like when you go to university, you have to study other business models. You have to study books and authors and all those things. Same thing with this is create references of people in your niche or maybe outside your niche that are having success. Break down what's working about their content. Also look at the content that's not working and make your own hypothesis of what's going on there. And don't just consume it from a consumer's perspective. Consume it from a perspective of how do I break down to see what's driving performance? And then how do I take those learnings and apply it to the next piece of content that I produce?
Lovely. Just one final question. I know I've overrun a little bit. Hope you don't mind. Just any exciting projects you're currently working on that you're kind of like really juiced about?
Well, I have my next book launching right now. It's called Hook Point: How to Stand Out in a 3-Second World. And it's all about how you position yourself for success in the micro attention world that we live in, both online and offline. So to me, that is what I'm truly passionate and excited about, because that's where I think people struggle the most, is because of everything I articulated about the algorithms, but also just in content in general, with 60 billion messages sent out each day, with the average person being exposed to between 4,000 and 10,000 ads a day. We live in a world of constant competition and clutter. And competition is no longer just your direct competition. You're competing against every other piece of content. You're competing against LeBron James, The Rock, Kim Kardashian, ESPN, all of these different content providers. You're competing for attention. And if you can't figure out a way to capture their attention in that first 3 seconds, then you have no ability to earn the next 10, 30, 60 seconds. Like a lot of people talk about your brand purpose, your why, your positioning, which is all very valuable stuff to have. Like, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of worthless if you can't get somebody to pay attention for 3 seconds, because they'll never get to your purpose. You'll never get to your brand. You'll never get to your product or your service. So that's what I'm truly excited about, because I think that that's going to have a tremendous impact on a lot of people's lives and career aspirations.
Lovely. And is it going to be on Audible as well? People are going to be
Yeah.
able to buy a copy and get an Audible?
Yeah, it'll be on Audible, I think August 4th, I think is when it
Oh,
launched.
so
Next
very,
week.
very, very soon. Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you for your time. And for anyone who's maybe just catching the end of this, whatever, this is Brendan Kane. And we spoke about your book, The 1 Million Followers. And I picked up a copy and I bought the Audible copy as well, and learned so much from it. And I think anyone could get a huge amount of value by picking up a copy of that book, especially if you're starting out, or even if you're already in the thick of it, but you want to do even better. It's definitely worth grabbing a copy. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I really, really do. I really mean that. It's been wonderful.